We are on the air. Welcome to the September 29th Parks and Rec Commission meeting. Anyone from the general public who wants to talk, please get a speaker card and turn it to Catherine, whether your topic is on the agenda or not. Okay, we will start with roll call.
Jennifer Hedderly.
Here.
Keith Rechtel.
Here.
Deidre Cromie. Ed Lowing.
Here.
Pat Markovich. Abby Knopper.
Here.
Stacy Ashland.
Here.
Eric Filseth.
Okay. Next is agenda changes. Does anyone have any agenda changes? Request deletions? Okay,
I have a request. Can we extend the community garden ad hoc report to 30 minutes instead of 20?
Is everyone okay with that? Yep. Okay, 30 minutes it is. That is item 4, is now 30 minutes long. We're not obliged to use all 30 minutes, obviously. Okay, the next oral communications, we have one speaker card. David is up.
Good evening, Chair Rechtel and Commissioners. I'm here to speak to you about recruitment for your body, the Parks and Recreation Commission. The city's extended the recruiting period for commissioners for the Parks and Recreation Commission. The extended deadline is October 16th at 5 p.m. We're hoping that yourselves, staff, and members of the public here, and members of the public watching from home consider either applying or passing the word on to members of the community that you think would make great Parks and Recreation Commissioners. Right now, we're looking to fill 3 terms that will run from November 1st, 2015 through December 15th, 2018. Applications are available in the back of the council chambers and online at cityofpaloalto.org/clerk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we move on to business. Approval of draft minutes. Does anyone have comments or errors in the minutes from last month? No? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve as written.
Second.
Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. It is passed. Okay. Next item is informational report on sustaining trees during the drought. We have Walter Passmore, Urban Forester of Palo Alto.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is going to be a fairly informal report on the status of our urban forest in regards to drought. I do want to let you know about some of the actions that we're taking and how we're proceeding with some short-term responses to the drought. So as we all know, impacts are increasing as the drought intensifies or lengthens. You can see in the upper right of this slide, there are some dead pines at El Camino Park. This is just one example of the increasing number of removals that we've seen as drought being a significant stressor. Usually it's not the only cause of tree mortality or decline, but more and more it's becoming very significant when we see problems with trees. Our tree removals have actually increased to more than 400 street and park trees during the past fiscal year, and that's as compared to less than 250 during 8 of the past 10. The other high year was the previous year, 2014, where we had a little over 300 tree removals. So you can see during the short term, our trend has been an increasing number of removals. To put this in perspective, the population of trees is 29,000 street trees approximately, and about 6,000 park trees in the developed parks. We're not currently inventorying or assessing the drought impacts on our open space trees, but we imagine the drought is likewise affecting those trees, and it's not insignificant. So in perspective, the removals are for the first time exceeding 1% of the population. So while it's not cause for immediate alarm, it surely does prompt some action and some attention to this issue. And we feel like if this continues over the long term, we're going to have a much more significant response to drought.
Thank you, Walter. On the bottom right, can you just speak to that graph, the bar graph? What is that showing?
Among other things, it has the number of tree removals, but it also has limb pickups, construction inspections, and then leverage funding. So the
really
limb
what
pickups,
we're looking at right now is, we're most interested in the orange bar. Is that correct?
just the yellow bar, correct?
Oh. Okay, my monitor is colored. So that yellow or orange bar is showing the increase. Are there any other bars up there that we should also be looking at, or is this used from another context and we're really just interested in that one bar?
No, this is from our annual accomplishment report. So really the most pertinent statistic is just the tree removals on that graph.
Okay, thank you. Well, I do have, well, I'll let you finish up and then we'll have a
Okay.
follow-up question on that.
So in the short term, we are taking some actions. We have been meeting with an interdepartmental drought response team to coordinate outreach and communication efforts. We've been collaborating with partner groups and expect that to increase. We've increased education and outreach focus during city-sponsored events such as our workshops. We do workshops on zero waste, on mulch and compost, on recycling, and we take opportunities at those workshops to talk about impacts of the drought on trees. We've generated some press releases, we're doing social media posts, and we've worked closely with our utility marketing team to do some focused outreach to utility customers. Hopefully all of you have seen one or more of these outreach pieces through some of those venues. Following up on outreach and education, we're also going to do a rapid assessment of all of our city, street, and park trees to identify which ones are both in need of water and could have the greatest benefit from some supplemental watering. We are going to be increasing delivery of non-potable water so that some of these trees will get 1 or 2 waterings prior to natural rainfall resuming. We hope in November. Sooner would be even better. And we're delivering that water via a contract for services. Also, by extending hours for the city water truck by using multiple drivers. So we'll extend hours from 40 hours a week to about 60 to 70 hours a week on the city water truck to keep that in operation. We're also renting 2 additional water trucks and staffing those with operators. So we're going from 1 truck to 4 trucks on the road to provide some supplemental water. That being said, that effort is only going to allow us to water once a month for about 7,000 trees, which is only 20% of the population. So obviously, the rapid assessment and all of this action has to be paired with equal response from homeowners, property owners, from our partners in the community to really be effective. So we're going to be increasing our outreach efforts in that regard, and our partners are doing the same. We have a picture on the screen of a magnolia tree on Alma, which is nearly dead. So this would not be one of the trees that would be receiving water because we would not expect that to respond to something as simple as dumping a little bit of water on it. And on this page is a number of resources. I'm going to talk first about the picture, which is one of the redwood trees at Magic Forest in Rinconada Park. That was a tree that we did some water injections and some other fairly basic treatments after a prompt from citizens that reported they noticed some symptoms on the tree that it looked unhealthy. So we did an inspection, followed up with the water injection and the treatments, and now if you look closely, you can see a lot of little green shoots coming out on that tree, and it's actually responding very well. It's returning to health, and so that's the type of tree that we would be identifying for watering. Not necessarily the species, but a tree in that type of condition where we can catch it early, it's showing some of the initial symptoms of drought stress, and have a good response from the water that we apply. Just quickly about the resources, we've produced an informational brochure, and we've also worked with Canopy to produce several additions to their website. So some good resources there. Statewide, we've been working closely with California Relief, which is a statewide organization that coordinates activities of nonprofits, over 100 nonprofits statewide that deal with urban forestry issues. They have a Save Our Water and Our Trees brochure that they produced in conjunction with the State Water Board. We've generated a press release, so there's the link for it there. The Save Our Water and Trees brochure that's specific to Palo Alto is linked, and then we're continuously updating the city's water page with drought updates. So those are some resources. Be glad to answer any questions and talk about what do we do after this initial push to save a few trees. What does it mean for the future? You might have some predictions that would help us to respond in a better way.
Okay, thank you. Before we start asking, we do have public comment. We have a speaker, David Moss. Please go to the podium there. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. By the way, I'm one of those people who applied for one of those 3 positions for the Parks and Rec Commission. One thing about the trees that we're losing, quite a few birch trees in the Green Meadow area are suffering. So they seem to have a particular affinity to shallow water. And what I was going to mention is that when we plant new trees, we should plant them with the idea that they too could have some kind of a drip system with a deep watering system instead of the way we water today, where it's mostly on lawns and goes down from there. So if we could change the way we plant new trees, that would be a great idea. And also, when we talk about the construction of basements and how much water we have to pull out of the ground to keep the basement dry while it's being constructed, there has to be a way to recycle that water and put it back in the ground elsewhere rather than pouring it into the storm drain. That's all I had.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner Knopper.
Hi. So that's very depressing, what you said. So a couple of things. So I'm on a couple of neighborhood email groups that have like 1,000 people on them, and everybody's been told to conserve water, right brown is the new green kind of thing. And I think that telling residents that trees are different than grass and the impact is much greater. It would be helpful maybe if you guys provided us, at least for me, like that one sheet, or if there's a particular resource that I'm looking at from that I could go to and pull it so I can send out to my email groups, hey, you need to water these trees. This is what you should look for with regard to drought the stress of the tree. If you're seeing this, this is what you need to do. This is how many times you should water. I don't think people might know that you should water a tree differently than like a regular lawn, bush, etc. So any extra information that you could provide so we could pay. I know I would like to post it on like my Facebook page, that kind of thing. So if you could just let me know specifically, direct me to that, it would be great.
Right. On the resource page, probably the Saving Our Trees in Our Water brochure that's specific to Palo Alto would be a great start. It has a lot of the information that you're talking about. And then the press release is a little bit more general, but it has guides to different resources in it as well.
Okay. Thank you.
I just have a couple questions on the tree removals. Is there anything illuminating about the proportion of street trees versus park trees in terms of where are we losing more of one versus the other? Or is it pretty much across the board?
No, it's fairly general. We're not seeing any trend on either side of the equation.
Okay. And is there, and then my next question is about the rapid assessment. It sounds like you're going to start doing that soon, and then, which is kind of a swing by and check out as many trees as you can and make an assessment. Is there a plan for ongoing reassessments over time? Obviously, if a tree is okay now, it may well be showing its signs of stress next month. How do you plan to go forward to keep that monitoring beyond citizen complaints? I think the current way to save a tree is for a citizen to call in and say, my tree's dying, what do we do?
Yeah, we obviously have limited staff resources. We're conducting about 2,000 inspections a year with the staff resources that we have. But that's a pretty small proportion of the population. Again, you know, when you're talking about 35,000 plus trees. So in order to focus our efforts, I wouldn't be surprised if we do another rapid assessment protocol in the spring to see how many of these trees actually responded to our supplemental watering. But we're also making a plea to citizens to report trees that have drought symptoms on them. And we have included information in our press release about what to look for.
And would you encourage residents to water street trees that they see in stress, or would you prefer that they contact you and have you water them?
No, we definitely need help from property owners, because even with all the supplemental actions we're taking, you know, we're only going to water 20% of the street trees max and park trees. And so we would love for people to step up and say, I'm going to help this tree through the drought, and then hopefully the rains will help it from there.
I think that's great. I'm really glad. I have seen a lot of action on the various lists in the last few weeks about concern about trees and the importance of watering them, and don't lose track when you're conserving water of what you need to do with the trees. I do think that it would be helpful to include in any ongoing public outreach about that the importance of watering them now. Don't wait until the El Nino that may or may not come. Just because we're close to winter doesn't mean they can make it that far. So it's really important that they water now. I'll leave it at that for now. thank you very much for coming tonight.
Commissioner Lowing.
Moving down the list, thanks for the report. Obviously, you are budgeting a certain amount of non-potable water for trees, and you're only getting to 20%. Raises the obvious question of, do we need a council memorandum to double the amount of potable water we should buy so we can save 40% of the trees? You understand basically my question?
So
Is it a budget item, basically, is what I'm asking?
No, I think the challenge is distribution of water, because we're under state mandates to conserve water and to conserve potable water. So really, we don't have the infrastructure in place to effectively distribute non-potable water. We don't have the pipelines, the distribution lines, the irrigation systems hooked up to non-potable sources. Therefore, distributing by truck is a very inefficient method of getting water to trees, and that's our limit. It's just how many trucks can we put on the road to deliver water, as opposed to, how do we efficiently use the non-potable sources that we have?
Okay, and my follow-up question was actually for Darren, who he just stepped to the microphone, but because you've been kind of pacing this and trying to cut back, I think it's 30%. So another obvious question, which I think I know the obvious answer, is we can't really cut back more there to put more water on the trees. So it's just a math equation. So do you want to address that?
Yes, thank you. It's a great question. And 34% was our target that we had to reach in potable water reduction. And we realized from the get-go that we were going to have an impact on trees if we kind of made that uniform cut in turf areas where there are trees. So we made changes in those spots to irrigate once a month, thinking that would sustain most of the trees. And in some areas it wasn't. And even though it may throw us off our target of 34, we've increased irrigation in those areas to sustain those trees. In some cases, it's one time a week, and it very well may throw us off our ultimate goal of 34% reduction potable, but we do believe in sustaining the trees, knowing that it's an asset that takes so very long to grow and sustain, so different from the turf.
Yeah. I'm stymied by those answers, so I think I'm done.
Along the same line of questions, I was wondering if the same thing about the infrastructure citywide for capturing gray water. I wasn't really thinking of it in terms of rainfall as well, but as far as that infrastructure being in place for citywide, not just for trees, but for other plants as well, is that something that, do you know if that's already being included in the comp plan moving forward, or is it even farther along than that?
Yes, I think it's both part of the comp plan and part of the Sustainability Climate Action Plan. Water is a key issue for our future, and how are we going to use our potable water? The future is probably one where we're using much less, maybe no potable water for landscape uses, and conserving for our indoor uses to solely use potable for drinking purposes and sanitary purposes.
So you're saying possibly conserving to the level of not even directing the water to save the trees?
I'm saying that we're actively trying to identify non-potable sources for landscape irrigation. So whether that's recycled water, the water that's being taken out of the ground for various purposes, gray water, rainwater harvesting. So there's a number of different options that are being considered, and I think you're going to see those explored further in the comp plan and the Sustainability Climate Action Plan.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the other question, as far as impact that individuals, that residents can have, we all know the shorter showers, eat less meat kind of suggestion, but as far as, the impact that the residents can make, how significant can that be versus the larger scale water use? Statewide agriculture is by far the biggest. So when we come down to the level of the Palo Alto level and residents conserving water, okay, I'm not watering my rose bushes, but am I going to make an impact on the redwoods, for example? Is that something that, is that too broad a question, or does that relate to the individual?
I think if everyone does their part, then we reach our goals as a whole. But obviously, one individual as compared to the population of California is fairly insignificant.
Will there be any sort of citywide set goals that are for residents to achieve? The park system has reached their water reduction goals. What about any sort of collective goals resident-wise that we'll be tracking?
Yes, the utility tracks the citywide reduction goal, and I think we're about on target to meet the state set goals for water conservation.
The state set goals for residents and cities, is it all combined or is it separated out so we know?
Yeah, it's all combined.
Okay, it would be interesting to see it separated out, so I think so residents would have tangible goals. The City of Palo Alto, highly competitive, might be worth looking into. Thanks.
Commissioner Ashland, I just want to add that the Utilities Department is doing a lot of work on this and supporting residents in different ways they can help with the goals. I'd encourage you to go to their website. They have all sorts of tips and advice for residents of how they can help. So if you haven't been there before, I encourage you to do that.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Cromie.
Hi, Walter Passmore, can I ask that you publish your systematic checks on the trees so we know which ones you're watering citywide? Can you make that information public so it's transparent and helpful to other residents? And where would we find you posting that?
Yes, we can post that to the city website, to the urban forestry page, and then follow up with our outreach outlets to let people know where to find that. But the rapid assessment, like I said, is probably going to be just that. We're not going to be identifying individual trees. Instead, we're probably going to be looking at a block by block where our distribution would be the most efficient. So we'll probably publish by block and track it that way.
How soon can we see that?
I'm hoping by next week.
Do you already have a site on your page where this information is posted, so it will be an update, or is this going to be a new visual?
No, this is a new graphic that we're going to put up.
Okay, and you're going to go through so we can look and see the whole city. We'll be able to see a documentation of the whole city, what you're doing?
Yes.
In about a week?
That's what I'm hoping for.
Okay, because I think that's really important. Okay, let me see that's my most important question.
Commissioner Cromie, I have a question. You want that information so people know what trees not to water or what trees to water?
And so people can see where the work is being done and not freak out that their neighborhood isn't getting any attention. So we can see the equity across the city, that attention is being given to all parts of the city, and that on a block by block basis, if we know where there's a cluster of trees and they're not getting any attention, that can alert individuals.
Thank you.
How much of the increase in tree death is due to deferred removal of trees? Because I assume with some of your limited resources, you probably have not kept up with the removal of dead trees. And also, any tree that was almost dead would have been kicked over the edge in this drought. So how much is that spike kind of due to deferred attention? Because when things are good, we don't tend to want to do that.
Yeah, I would say very, very little is because of deferred maintenance. If we go back, that's forward. Back to this graph, you can see the red line for limb pickups actually spiked back in 2010, and it's been declining ever since. So limb pickups is one indicator of how much maintenance may be deferred, because when we defer maintenance, we tend to have more broken limbs, more falling limbs. So while that can be due to drought as well, you've seen a decline in limb pickup. So, I don't think it's a maintenance issue. It's primarily due to drought.
Okay, and how aware are you of the hot spots of neighborhood communication in the city? So I'll give an example. Midtown sends out lots of notices. I happen to be on their list. I don't live in Midtown, but I just signed up for it. I think that Commissioner Knoppers mentioned her part of town is very active. Can you do a survey and figure out what parts of the city are not getting this message? Because we have many dead zones in our city in terms of neighborhood communication, and those are probably the neighborhoods in need of leafleting. We don't have active neighborhood associations across the city, at all. And so I think we need to kind of look at a per neighborhood assessment, and I think it would behoove our staff to do some research on which neighborhoods have active communication for all kinds of reasons. And maybe you go to a PAN meeting to figure it out, or the Palo Alto Neighborhood Association, you can ask the leaders of that to tell you. I mean, there should be some good ways to figure this out. I know my neighborhood has almost zero communication going on. And I haven't seen anything on tree drought, just as feedback. I don't know where are you distributing the brochures, for example?
The brochures have been distributed through our local workshops, so if people attend the workshop, they would receive a copy. And then electronically, a lot of the information has been distributed, but there's not been like a door-to-door type of distribution effort. But we are thinking of doing some more personalized action like you're suggesting, possibly identifying all the trees that we're watering with some kind of a ribbon or leaflet. I don't know. This is a kind of a work in progress where we're trying to do something now because we don't want to overplan and underact.
Yeah, and so lastly, I just want to say an example of an extreme failure in tree health is in Monroe Park. And now that I have Darren Anderson, Peter Jensen, and Walter Passmore sitting here, I'd like to tell you that Monroe Park is in crisis. When I moved in that neighborhood 14 years ago, we had 8 huge, beautiful, mature trees in our park. 100% of them died. 100% of them were removed. They were replaced, and of the replacements, they were replaced like a couple years ago. The biggest ones of the replacements are now dead. One of those has been removed. Another one is dead and needs to be removed. And in the back, so we have no shade coverage of the turf in Monroe Park. We have a shortage of trees in South Palo Alto. We have a shortage of parks in our neighborhood. It's in crisis. All the redwood trees at the back of the park are in extreme distress, and it wouldn't surprise me if within 5 years all of them are dead. And so I just want someone in the city to really pay some attention to that park that's in crisis, essentially. And there might be other people in the city who want to give feedback. And then lastly, I will say, when I personally called your office to ask about 4 pines on my property that are owned by the city that are near death, I didn't receive any call back. I made those calls 2 months ago. I made a series of calls, no follow-up whatsoever. And so I don't even know what to do as a citizen about the 4 dying pine trees that are on Miller Avenue, right by the Wilkie Way pedestrian bridge. They've been dying for a long time, and this might send them over the edge. So that's kind of, I'm just ending with that personal plea. Thank you.
Okay, this is troubling just because it takes a long time to grow a tree. If it's brown turf, you can replace that, or even shrubs, you can replace that. But if a 40-foot tree, you just can't replace. And so it is troubling that we have issues. The trees that we've lost, what percentage of those are non-native and which percentage are native?
Currently, our native population is less than 10% of the total.
And can you say, are they doing better or worse? Are they roughly the same?
I don't really know without looking at some specific numbers.
Because my question are these trees that are dying because of the drought due to being chosen inadequately, inappropriate trees at inappropriate locations, and now will this give us a chance to redo it and put something appropriate in that spot? Or was this an appropriate tree at an appropriate spot and it's just purely lack of water that killed it?
So my general observation is that the trees that were appropriately sited and native and adapted to local conditions like valley oak, we're not seeing much mortality. We are seeing a lot of mortality in non-native pines, magnolias, camphors. So those are species that probably weren't appropriate for local conditions without a lot of supplemental water. So I think,
are those trees still being planted by the city, or are those trees no longer planted by the city?
No, none of those are planted anymore.
Okay. You mentioned also about in the long run, we want to get away from using potable water for irrigation of any sort. This issue with the total dissolved solids in the recycled water is a real issue for trees. And would we increase the irrigation of not using the use of non-potable water in irrigation? Would we do that by reducing the TDS, or do we do that by changing the tree selection to something that can tolerate high TDS?
So I think we're talking about very long-term solutions. Obviously, we're not going to convert immediately to recycled water, and conversion would be conditional on the trees being able to use that water effectively and to not have salinity buildup in our soils. So there's a number of ways to make sure that we're using that water wisely. And the other water sources that I mentioned, also need to be explored in much more detail. So this is not a change that's going to occur in the next year or 2 years. So we're probably going to continue having discussions about how do we budget our water use so that we protect our urban forest, we try to minimize the number of trees that are dying and need to be replaced, and at the same time, we try to meet some very optimistic conservation goals.
So what is our primary goal going on? Are we trying to go to more of a native selection of trees so we don't have to water at all? Or are we going to trees that can tolerate high salt content?
No, native and drought tolerant, we think it's the obligation of the non-potable water suppliers to bring down salinity levels to an acceptable amount so that we can use it broadly. And there's a lot of plans in place to do just that.
These are, by plans, do you mean concrete plans or do you mean potential plans?
No, as part of the distribution for the recycled water, council tasked staff to pursue sources for extending the pipeline, but also to reduce the salinity through a variety of techniques. For example, one technique being considered is reverse osmosis. It could be a fairly expensive technique, but potential is there to reduce the TDS down below the level of our groundwater currently.
Okay. You also mentioned that using the non-potable water right now, we don't have a delivery system. We don't have pipes, and we have to do everything by truck. Can we get volunteers to drive trucks on weekends? For example, if Canopy wanted to deliver, is that something that would even be allowed, or is that not possible?
It's possible. You're just talking about a very inefficient system.
Well, I'm not talking about going forward. I'm talking about right now during drought. This would not be a regular, every Saturday they'd be watering for remainders.
Yeah, it's possible, and there has been a very
had any
limited amount of
discussion
use
with-
for the groundwater stations where they're discharging for the basement construction.
Have you had any discussions with Canopy? Would they be interested in staffing trucks on the weekend?
Right now, Canopy does not have that potential to increase their capacity to do that type of thing.
But if volunteers were available, would you be receptive, or is that something that you're not interested in?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges, but I mean, we're definitely receptive to exploring any solutions at this point.
Okay. And finally, Darren, how are the open space trees doing? Have you do any inventory on that?
No, we don't have inventory. We have ranger assessment from trails, by and large. There's a lot of sudden oak death that we've noticed, and tree failures, much in keeping with what Walter's describing, so it's certainly affecting it. Canopy there is a much higher degree of native trees. Lots of oaks are hanging in there that aren't dying of sods, the sudden oak death. But it's part of the work that Walter's done in the Urban Forest Master Plan calls for a sod developing plans to address the sod. That is long-term canopy coverage to make sure if it's not signature historic oaks, that it's something comparable. So long-term, we still have that beautiful canopy that is our open space is famous for.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Okay, thank you, Walter. Okay, next up we have Lacey Cortston. She's going to be talking about the new online procedure for summer camp registration. Lacey, come on
So
up.
as Lacey comes up, let me just, I think you've all met Lacey now. Lacey Cortson is a Senior Community Services Manager. She oversees the Mitchell Park Community Center, so she manages that center and many of our teen programs in the department, the middle school athletic program, and a number of other things, adult sports, those types of things. And so she's here to talk about the summer camp registration process and the hope of moving to a more efficient online system.
It's working. There we go. Hello, Commissioners. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm going to be presenting a proposal that a group of employees in CSD have been working on to redesign our current summer camp registration process. Who here is familiar with the draw? It's been around for a while. Everybody, fantastic. So I won't go into too much detail. The draw is our current registration process for summer camp. Essentially, it's the first chance a Palo Alto resident has to sign up for a summer camp. They have to submit an envelope with their registration form completely filled out by a certain date. After that date, staff collect all the envelopes, kind of mix them up and randomize them, and then redistribute them to staff on the day of the draw, and we register. It's a manual process. We close down our community centers. That entire day and all of our resources are focused on getting all those draw registrations processed. It was a very effective, and it's helped to resolve a lot of issues we had in the past with long lines for summer camp, and it's worked for several years, but now with some of the technology upgrades that we've had recently, along with just a desire to more effectively serve our customers, we think it might be due for an upgrade to the draw process. So with that, the committee was convened, and we did, oh shoot, I have to do this one. There we go. A committee was convened, and the first step in this process was we wanted to do some research. We wanted to make sure that our assumptions were accurate and reality. And so we sent out a survey to customers, but before I get into what the survey results are, I just want to give you some data about our summer camp registration. So it is the heaviest period of enrollment for us. We have close to 1/3 of total registrations and $1.2 million in revenue just in summer camps. Outside of the registrations that are submitted for the draw, 77% of them were done online. So if you didn't get that first chance and submit an envelope to the draw, everyone else, 77% of them preferred online registration. And then when you look at the entire year of registration, 76% of all those registrations were done online. We also recently, in 2013, February of 2013, upgraded our registration system to ActiveNet from Class. And ActiveNet is just a much more robust online system. So we have several modules that customers can use online beyond just registering for classes. They can do facility rentals, look up facility availability. They can purchase memberships. They can refill those memberships. There's several things that our customers now have access to that they didn't before. And so that's just some background data on our business. Let's see. Now the survey, like I said, we sent out a survey to over 2,200 customers, and these are all customers that have registered with us in the past 2 years since we made that upgrade to ActiveNet. We got 210. We recently got 2 more responses, so 210 responses. But some of the highlights from that survey is that overwhelmingly, 95% responded that if they were given an option to register online or in person for a summer camp, that they would prefer to register online. In addition, we asked them to rank priorities that they had personally in a summer camp registration process. And number 1, again, overwhelming, was just online, having an online versus in-person option. The ones that came up after that were convenience of process, and then immediate notification if they got into a class or if they were put on a wait list. And the draw currently does not address those top 3 things, and so just another reason for us to continue our research to validate our assumptions. Next, you'll see we asked them if they have registered with us online, and 88% of them said they had. And we asked them to tell us about their experience, and 75% said that it was a good experience. And that was very good for us to hear, because a very important piece of successfully transitioning to having an online option is that our online system is user-friendly, and it's efficient and effective. And so this kind of validated that. And the next thing we wanted to know is just more about when we should open up the summer camp registration process. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it seems like municipalities and other nonprofit organizations are opening up their summer camp registration earlier and earlier. And we just wanted to make sure that that's truly what the customer wanted. What we found out is that March is overwhelmingly the most popular month for customers to be able to register for a summer camp. It's just early enough, it's not too early. And then also, if we did have an online option, they prefer to have it on a weekday. If it was just going to be in person, they want it to be on a weekend, and that kind of makes sense just for people that are working and unable to come in person during the week. The second survey that we sent out was to local municipalities, so neighboring cities, Menlo Park, Campbell, all the way up to San Francisco, and we got 12 responses. Of those 12 responses, 10 of them said that they do open up registration online and in person for the first day of summer camp. And the 2 that didn't, one of them doesn't have an online option, period. Their current system does not support online registration. And the other one actually opened up online registration at midnight and then in-person registration at 8 a.m. the same day. Some other things that are other data points that we got from them is if they feel their customers prefer the online registration, 80% agreed with that, and it was split between when they open up registration, February or March, and the majority open it on a Monday. So moving on. So looking at all those different data points that we discovered in our research, both of our own data and then the data that we got from our customers and from neighboring cities, we felt like it was time for us to move from the draw to offering an online option for our customers. We do know that that's going to be a significant change from how we've done it in the past, and we don't want to underestimate how that change will affect our customers. Some people get intense anxiety over a process that's changing, especially when you have a camp that you are dying to get your child dialed into. So considering all those things, we kind of put the proposal into 3 different buckets. The first one is education campaigns. So we want to obviously educate our staff to make sure that they know the system inside and out, can answer any questions, understand what the customer goes through, and then educate the customer and kind of over-communicate the change. And so some of the things that we'll be doing is training our activity supervisors on how to properly put classes into ActiveNet to provide for better search function. If they know that they're going to provide age exceptions, to make sure they account for that in the entry. And then also, ActiveNet will allow parents to actually put their friends on their account, even if they're not in the same household, so that they can register for a class or camp together. And so we'll teach our staff how to do that. And then obviously our customer service staff, we want them to be on point, know everything inside and out about this process so that they can be super helpful for anyone that may have questions. Next, you can see the very comprehensive outreach campaign to our customers. So we're going to do that in many different formats. People prefer to get information in different ways. So we'll obviously do the email blasts and have a website available with all the information. In addition, we'll send out packets in the mail, snail mail, and then we'll also provide for workshops where people can sign up for appointments to come and sit down with a camp concierge who will kind of show them how to set up a wish list, which is the best way to do online registration with us through ActiveNet. And so people, if they want that one-on-one attention, step-by-step, we want to provide that for them. In addition, we'll have online tutorials, FAQs, and registration checklists to kind of just get them set up and ready. City of Chicago's Park District actually uses ActiveNet as well, and they process several million registrations within minutes when they open their summer camp registration. And so to account for that kind of load, they've also been doing these education campaigns and have kind of done a lot of the work for us. So this is just an example of the FAQs they have, but they also have video webinars, screenshots, checklists that customers can go through. So we'll be kind of working with them to tag team and create our education campaigns.
When you say ActiveNet, do you mean that you're using their software on your computers or that you're using their software on their computers?
ActiveNet is a private company, so they provide the software and we're just customers. So City of Chicago is a customer as well as Palo Alto and several other cities in the area.
So it's actually run on their computers, so they're providing both.
It's cloud-based.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
This question.
Very good. Thank you.
And then we also, the third bucket is just day of logistics. How are we going to manage, in person and online? And we have 3 kind of main goals that day. We want to anticipate our customers' needs. We want to avoid long lines as much as possible, and we want to provide equal access for all of our customers. And so we've decided to have 2 in-person registration sites, one in North Palo Alto, one in South Palo Alto, and consolidate our staffing resources to those 2 locations. For those customers that may not trust their internet connection or they don't have internet or a computer, we will have temporary computer labs set up for that day where they can come in and log into their own account and go through their wish list, which again is the best way to get into a class with ActiveNet. And some other things that you see on there, other ideas we had for how we're going to anticipate our customers' needs. This is kind of the timeline for implementation. The first part is going to happen soon. Hopefully, it's a testing period for our ActiveNet functionality. There's a couple features that were recently released that we want to make sure do what they say they're going to do, because it's kind of critical pieces in our plan. And if ActiveNet functionality does not live up to what it says is capable of, then we wouldn't proceed. But that's going to happen in October, followed by staff education, collateral for our outreach campaigns, and camp concierge appointments, registration fair, and then the registration day. And this is, it's not a small undertaking when you're considering a change like this. So we're not underestimating the amount of staff time it's going to take. And this is just kind of an estimate of the different people that will be involved and how involved they will be. So while it is a big undertaking, we feel like it is due. Staff want it and customers want it. And it's just now a matter of making sure that we handle this the right way, do our due diligence, and make sure that we over-communicate to our customers. Any questions?
Commissioner Heatherly.
Thank you, Lacey. That was a great presentation, and I think that your proposal is really well-researched and thoughtfully developed. I do have some questions and a concern. So my first question is, they're mostly about the registering with friends issue. So you're saying that ActiveNet does have the capacity to allow you to register for classes with friends by linking them to your account somehow. Does that tie you then to that one friend for all your classes, or can you sign up for this class with this friend, that class with that friend?
Yeah, it does not tie you to that person forever.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other question about that is, how did you handle the registration with friends under the old draw system?
They would put the registration forms in the same envelope.
Okay, that's right. Yeah. So then if either of them gets a spot, they both get the spot. So you allot 2 spots
Hopefully.
for that thing when you would draw.
Right.
Okay. So my next question is about the automation. I think it makes a ton of sense to do all your registration, or the majority of your registrations online, even for the summer camps. I'm a little concerned about switching from the lottery aspect of the draw to a first come, first serve approach. I know a lot of parents who set their alarm for 5 a.m. and sit on their computer to get into their middle school sports class or whatever else it is that's a first come, first serve. And I also know a lot of parents who are really bitter about that because for whatever reason their circumstances don't allow them to be sitting there at their computer at that exact time when things open. So it does create an inequity in access to those first spots. I wonder if you guys thought at all about doing online registrations, but having, your 5 p.m. deadline for register by 5 p.m. to be in the lottery or the automated draw, and then you do an automated placement of who goes where, similar to what you did with the draw, but without the manual effort.
Right, yeah, ActiveNet unfortunately doesn't provide that type of functionality for a lottery system that's automated. It would have to be a manual staff-run process.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
So I am really concerned about that. I think you're going to get a lot of pushback from a lot of people about that feeling like an unfair process. I'm not sure where you go from there, if there's something you can do to build on what ActiveNet can do, or if the only way to accomplish that randomness of placement is by doing it manually.
So there's a couple things. I mean, the inequity of parents not being able to be online at the time that registration opens. I think you're referring to our middle school athletics registration system right now, and that we open it at 8:30 on a weekday. So it is a difficult time for a dual working household or a single working household to manage. And so that's why when we went to this process, we thought about that and we wanted to push it up to 7 a.m., hoping that would allow for people to be able to jump online if they want to, or come down in person and not have it affect them getting to work on time. And so there's that piece. The other piece of it is going to be a massive amount of people getting on at the same time and registering for a limited number of spots. And so, it's kind of the same way we do all of our other registration periods. It's online or in person. If they're super anxious, they can always come down and stand in line. But what we found with MSA is that you have a better chance actually of getting in a class if you do it online yourself. And it's just kind of instantaneous. At the same time, it's going to be immediate response. You'll know right away if you're in or on the wait list, and so you can immediately go look for your second choice and register. It's just it's instantaneous, and so I feel like a lot of the anxiety that we get from customers currently with the draw is not knowing if they're in that camp or not, and if they're going to have to change their plans, or by the time they realize they're on the wait list, the second camp that they would have registered for is already full. And so it's kind of there's plus and minuses to either way you look at it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cromie.
I just wanted to echo what Commissioner Heatherly said. I have the exact same concern about going to a mad rush system. So I guess there's 2 of us on the commission that are really concerned about that. My kids are older now. They're 19 and 15, so I'm not doing this, but we were a heavy camp user. We did this every year. When I first started, the first year I moved to Palo Alto in 2001, I stood on the sidewalk and all night to get into the camps because my neighbor took me under his arm and said, "You have young children, you don't know anyone, come stand on the sidewalk with me and we'll stay here all night and get into camps." So that was my experience, and I thought it was a huge upgrade to go to the draw. I loved the draw. I do realize there are some issues, like you said, when you don't get in, you can't quickly maneuver with a draw, just the point you just made, but I just think it's really sad to have this mad rush. I don't know what else to say about it. I agree with Commissioner Hetterly that we need a software that can put people in a reservoir for a couple of hours and then disperse it some way that is more equitable. So I would second that, but you'll hear from your constituency if people don't like it. You know, you're hearing from 2 people now about just a heads up that some people might be disappointed. The second thing I wanted to mention was the idea of the friends linking themselves together. Do you put a limit on that? So, because I know some classes only have 12 spots. And so are you going to allow 6 friends to link themselves and take up half of that class?
That's something that we haven't looked into at all. It's a good point that you bring up.
Because summertime really is a time for kids to branch out, and I think it's really a sad situation if cliques of friends are just wanting to recapitulate that in a camp setting. So I personally think it should be a limit of 1 friend, and that's it. And it shouldn't even have to exist, really, especially for the classes. Again, you'll have to remind me, I just remember when my kid was young, it was the art classes that typically had a limit of 12, and then some of the really popular science classes at the Junior Museum did not have many, maybe they're up to 15 students. You would probably know this, but it is a really small number, especially for a very well-organized parent to network and fill that up. So let me just make sure. Yeah, I really, the last point I'd make is I love your idea of helping people practice this. And so I assume from your timeline that you allowed, tell me if this is right, so somewhere like a week ahead, can a parent go get a tutorial on how to use the website?
Several weeks. We'll start that 2 months before we actually have the first day of summer camp registration open. So it'll start with the summer camp registration fair, and then we'll continue to take in-person appointments right up until the day that we open registration.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Something too is, you know, we felt that concern too. It's why we've been so hesitant with changing the draw. But our research and talking to our customers has not reflected that concern. And so that was actually interesting to us. You know, we wanted to get a very wide range of feedback. You know, 10% out of all the surveys that we sent out is not that high of a number, but overwhelmingly 95% said they would prefer an online process. And so they're just taking that into consideration.
Was the question online versus not online, or was the question random lottery versus first come, first serve?
It was a question of online versus in person.
Okay, so I think that's kind of apples and oranges. The commissioners aren't concerned about the online issue as much as the fact that you have to be sitting at the computer at 6:01 a.m. or whatever the time the cutoff time is. And if you're a half hour late, you may miss the class. And then now that you have that pressure. And that's not the only way to do something online, so people may have misunderstood the question. If you say online versus in person, people think, oh, I can go, they order stuff off Amazon all the time, I can order a class off Palo Alto, no problem. And they don't realize the time pressure that may have come with that. Do you have a question?
Yeah. My first question was, do you plan to do any user testing, both of the people who will be new to this process for the first time, as well as repeat customers who have registered their kids for Palo Alto camps in the past.
Can you define user testing a little bit? Like user testing of the new system, have them go through it and make sure it's...
Well, their feedback on the system, as opposed to the training. It's the user research is where you sit the user down and you put 8 or 10 users, one by one or whatever, and you say, let's see how it goes. And you just sit there and record their problems. I mean, it's a standard practice on software design, so I was just wondering if we were able to do something like that in the city before we get to the training point. I mean, I don't think you're going to do away with the training point.
No.
But if you could do that step first and just see where the glitches are. Sometimes it's the wording, sometimes it's not just the software bugs that you wish you could change, but it's actually a lot of times the wording that you do have control over, so.
Yeah, when we first upgraded to ActNet, we did do that. We did user testing, both of customers and then of our staff. Because the staff wasn't familiar with the customer side of things, so we just wanted to watch them go through it. If staff can't understand it, we know that our customers can't understand it. So yes, we will continue to do that, and we've done it repeatedly with like MSA. We moved MSA to an online and in-person registration process. It was the same thing, so absolutely. We'd want to see where those bumps are.
Great, thanks. And yeah, the randomization factor, I've signed my kids up the past couple of years for several camps that have used a system called Bunk One. It might just be for sleepover camps as opposed to day camps. It does not have the randomization built in. You do have to be online at a specific, 12 noon on a certain day. And even this most recent year, the system locked out. And so you could have been on there from day one, and they're like, "Oh, we're sorry." So, but they're beholden to this Bunk One software company. They clearly don't have a lot of other choices because at least 3 of the camps that my kids have done have used that, and the camp offices just apologize profusely for what Bunk One does and doesn't do. So if you're not already requesting ActiveNet, is that what they're called? The customers' voices are important to the companies. I would request the randomization feature. That feeling of being, dedicating your whole day and still getting locked out of the system because of the system it's not even set up to do randomization. It's first come, first serve. And that's clearly a disadvantage to a lot of people. So I'm not surprised we didn't see it in the survey. I went through the survey myself, and it wasn't something that I really felt was asked. I really felt the whole online versus offline, hard copy. Of course we want online, but I didn't feel that I was being asked the question, do you want this to be first come, first serve versus random? So I just think if you haven't already asked the software company, put in your feature request. It's worth it to put in that request, because if they don't hear it from big clients, they're really not likely to offer it. But if they are hearing it from a lot of the cities, they might consider that in the future.
Thank you.
I do have the same concern about the first come, first serve, but I do like the feature of immediate response. You know what camp you're in, and if you don't get in that camp, you immediately can go to another camp, and by the 2 hours later, you know what camps you have for the summer. The draw, you would always have this uncertainty, will I get into this camp? So I just do see the plus side of having the first come, first serve. I would want to make sure that that's what the community wants, and have an explicit survey to say, which do you prefer? For the draw, go ahead, Rob.
Go ahead, I just had a fun.
Okay. For last year, for the draw, what percentage of the courses filled up after the initial draw? Were most of them filled, or just some of them filled, or?
No, yeah, the same ones. I would say less than 50%, but they're 50.
50?
Less than 50%.
Okay.
But you really need it. There's a lot of sports camps that won't fill up, so you really need to ask the question, are 100% of your science camps filling up? What percentage of your art camps are filling up? I think that's a better way to ask that.
Yeah, so what Commissioner Cromie is saying, there is some high impact camps that are just very, very popular, like Zoo Camp, and there's only a handful of them, and some of the art camps where there's, you can only have 12 or 15 maximum kids. That they are very, very popular, and they fill up quickly. Even on the draw, when we're doing it sort of this manual process, within a couple of hours of registering, they're filled up.
And we don't have the capability of adding more of those popular camps?
We try every year. We add funding. we had staffing, but to some of them are just, there's just a limit of space, like a zoo camp. We have one zoo. I mean, you can't add, more zoo camps. There's only so much space and time. So
Could they make a bigger zoo?
yeah, we're working on that, actually. I was going to say, this is an interesting challenge and problem, and I've got some history with it because I ran the Coverly event when it was first come, first served twice, and I said, there's got to be a better way than this. This is crazy. And Lacey's heard this story, but we did a survey and asked that question, first come or a random process, what do you think? And we put out that survey, and we got 500 plus responses, and it was like 49% said first come, first served, and like 51% said some type of random process. And we brought in, had some focus groups with people on both sides and sort of tried to work through, what is the solution here? And the conclusion was the draw, and that's what was developed after that, and a process that they felt would be more fair and equitable. And it was pretty clear because people, that were disabled or older or other things that we can't sleep out all night on the concrete. We had 1,000 people in line, by 5 in the morning. But that was some years ago, and now we're at a point where we have, faster and better technology, and most people have access to technology, and we can provide access to those that don't. So we do think it's it's time to think about doing this, and it's the most typical way that cities do it. I think 90% or something of cities do. Yeah, and an online system, first come, first served. Yeah. And
I think the best situation is that we have enough classes that it takes hours to fill up and not minutes.
Right.
If it takes hours to fill up and you snooze, then that's more understanding. But if it's like 3 minutes and all of a sudden that class is full, that's really high pressure.
And it's going to be even less than that. It'll be seconds. And the way the system works, it allows you to set up, what camps you would like in your wish list. And really, so you set up your whole summer that way, and then you just hit sign me up for my wish list, and then zip. And everybody's doing that. And so within seconds, the high impact, those highly impacted camps are going to be filled up. The customer then will receive that notice, though, that you didn't get in, you're on a wait list or whatever, and then you can immediately then start searching and looking for something else to put your child into. So that's good and bad, I think. I mean, it's good because we're hearing from customers, they like the self-service. And they like, the more self-service they can have control over things, that's a good thing. And the immediate response is really good. But there is a other reality, and that is increased anxiety. One, that you see immediately that you didn't get your child into that one camp that they really wanted, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to then deal with that and quickly look for another spot that's also filling up really quickly. So now the customer is trying to do that, or the parent, Palo Alto resident, is trying to do that rapidly, and that's going to create, some anxiety, particularly the first couple of times where it's new. I think that shifts some of the stress of this process of summer camp registration to the parent, which I think is going to be difficult. So the more we can, communicate and educate, the residents about how to use the system and be familiar with navigating the system and working through it, I think will help a lot. So, it's a tough one for me. I can see sort of both sides of it. I appreciate the work Lacey's done and the staff and the thinking, and we are hearing a lot from our residents that are signing up for classes that online would be, is preferred. And just the last thing I would say about the survey, mm-hmm. The people that responded to the survey are familiar with our system. I think 88% or something had signed up before, and they know that it's a first come, first serve system. So I'm not sure that people responded to the survey that they didn't realize that would be a first come, first serve process if it's online. I think my sense is the majority probably would have understood that.
Maybe. I'm not typical, but if someone asked me online versus paper, I would just think, what am I using to sign up, and not the registration style.
Because online randomized registration is pretty rare. You see it a lot. And
it just wasn't clear.
Yeah.
It wasn't clear from the survey.
Right. We could have made it more clear.
No, no worries. It just wasn't clear at all from the survey, because when you are switching our established user base with the draw is used to the randomization, I do think we're going to hit the biggest bump in that.
Commissioner Headley.
I have a quick question. I don't know if you've already answered it. If you're a family with multiple kids, can you sign them all up at exactly the same time, or do you have to do them sequentially?
It stores the information.
You can do it all at the same time.
So your family account registers everybody all at once?
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as it's in the wish list.
Thanks.
First of all, I didn't understand the wish list system. I've done a lot of online registration, mostly for Girl Scout camps. And for that, it opened at a certain time and there wasn't a pre-wish list, so you just scrambled at midnight or whenever it opened. But I've never used a system where you collect it in a wish list. So for those people who have collected it appropriately, there is that mini randomization process when they all hit enter at once. So you have, 2,000 families doing that at once. So I like that piece. I like that. I still would like to have the app fixed to have a more random process, but that's nice to know. One thing I forgot to ask last time is, I know one way you can actually increase capacity for a limited venue like the zoo. I noticed this, I was looking through our prior calendars for the camps, and I noticed that none of the camps, from my research, start until at least 2 weeks after school is out. And I asked someone about that, actually, an administrator at the Junior Museum, and she told me, we don't start until 2 or 3 weeks after school's out because we have to train everyone. And and I think I had that information right. I confirmed with her. I said, I see that you don't start for a few weeks after school is out, and is that true? And she said, yes, it's true, and this is the reason why. And I think that is an opportunity for some improvement in terms of offering more classes at the Junior Museum. Of course, with it going under construction and everything, it's going to be a little bit different, until that remodel settles out. But the reason I think it's an untapped resource is because for the Junior Museum, you do have a CIT program, and those kids do need to go through some kind of training. It's not like you do for the other arm of the recreation camps seem to have more extensive training. I don't know exactly, but you could say, like, for the first 2 weeks when we haven't really done adequate training, that's when we would schedule experienced CITs, because many of the CITs are not in their first year. They are coming back again. So I just wanted to throw that out on the table to maybe look at that. And I think also parents sometimes want camps for right when school gets out. So I think it would also help working families.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Cromie. It is a challenge, particularly with the change in the school calendar and the kids getting out earlier. And many of our camp staff are college students that are still returning. And so there's a challenge there. My understanding, though, is it's about a week, not 2 or 3 weeks. But we'll look into that, because that if it's that long.
Look into it, because I looked really carefully, and I saw it was at least 2 weeks from my research.
Okay.
Thank you, Lacey. Thank you. Okay. Next up is the Community Garden Ad Hoc Report and Recommendation.
Okay. I'm going to kick this off, if that's okay.
Yeah, yes, please. Go.
Okay. So Commissioner Cromie and I have prepared the report, and I'm certainly not going to go through it all point for point. I'm going to summarize it in about 5 minutes. I can go slower if people have questions. So, but we'll see. I'm going to try to go through the background, the history, and how we got to this point, and then I hand it over at that point to Commissioner Cromie to review our recommendations. So overall, we found that there is a disconnect between the community need, the demand for public gardens, and the availability that's based on location. So from the map of the 3 public community gardens, they're all 3 not only north of Oregon Expressway, but they're all 3 north of Embarcadero, and they are Johnson Park, Eleanor Pardee, and Rinconada gardens. In addition, we've listed out 3 that fall into the public-private partnership category. Gamble Gardens is a nonprofit garden that is a partner with the city, is listed on the city website. And while they don't offer garden plots for rent, they do offer gardening instruction to the community as a whole. The Midtown Community Garden is privately owned land, but is managed by a non-profit partner of the city that is Actera. So that definitely falls into the public-private partnership category because Actera is a city partner. And lastly is Ventura Garden, which we're going to talk about in this report. So at the real high level, the Ventura Garden, the entire property at Ventura is city-owned land, both the buildings as well as the open space. But the garden, which is part of the open space, is not city managed, not currently under city rules and regulations. The Ventura Community Garden there is currently managed by PAC, which is the Palo Alto Community Child Care nonprofit that's a city partner. So if you go way back to 1981, the city purchased the entire Ventura property and leased it to PAC, but in reality, it is just the buildings on that property that were leased to PAC for community childcare and office space and community use. The open space was retained by the city being responsible for all the open space at that site, including the playing fields and the playground, which make up what we call Ventura Park, and also include what is now the garden. So the garden wasn't created originally by PAC. It was created and funded by the Ventura Neighborhood Association approximately in '93. Ventura Neighborhood Association requested funding to build the garden on that land, and funding was not provided, but they were allowed to build the garden on that land. And at some point after that, PAC assumed management of the garden, but using rules and pricing and regulations that are different from the city public gardens. We did look at who is currently renting the plots at the Ventura site. 2 of them are a child care center on site that PAC runs called Sojourner Truth. 10 of the plots are rented by the Country Day Little School, which is a tenant, a subletter of the building space by PAC that also provides child care. And one, which we believe might be the largest plot, is rented by the Keys Middle School, which is adjacent to the Ventura property, but it's unrelated to PAC and unrelated to the city. There's additionally 1 Mountain View resident, and the remainder of the 29 plots are rented by Palo Alto residents, presumably, most likely, that are in close proximity to the Ventura area. So the Ventura Garden application does say it's restricted to Ventura area neighborhood residents, but they don't enforce that restriction. So in the lease, which we've included after our report in this packet, it stipulates that the city pays for the water for all the open space at the site. PAC pays just for the water that the buildings use. So the preschools, the child care centers that the building houses, PAC pays for that water, but the water for the open space, for the playing fields, as well as the gardens, is all paid for by the city. So we looked at the lease and included that here, and specifically want to call your attention to page 31 of the lease. So it's very near the back of your packet. Exhibit C for the guidelines for site usage specifically states that all other open space is subject to the same use conditions that govern the use of city parks in this class. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Commissioner Cromie for recommendations. There's really a wonderful opportunity here as far as the educational use of those gardens. The preschools getting access to it are wonderful, but there's a bit of a breakdown as far as availability of that garden and transparency in the process about how the plots are available and how they're rented.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ashland. I want to just take you through the recommendations. So Commissioner Ashland ended with attachment C of the lease, which shows that the open space should be governed by city guidelines. This park, this community garden is within the open space. So our recommendation is to bring this parkland, which includes the Ventura Garden, under city rules and regulations. And like I just said, it is supported by the lease. The reason, another rationale is that we have a great need for public garden space in the southwest neighborhoods of the city. That is indicated when you look at the map that Commissioner Ashland went over that shows that our public gardens are on the north side of Embarcadero. We also need consistency with city rules and regulations on how this garden is managed. So that is our primary recommendation. And so within that primary recommendation, we recommend that we proceed by creating a clear timeline and a multi-phase process. And that's one thing we want to discuss with this commission on how we should proceed. And Commissioner Ashland and I wrote out some steps, which I'll just quickly go through because I want to open this up to discussion as soon as possible. So what we need to do to proceed is we need documentation of current garden dimensions and plot sizes. We need to determine who will manage this garden under city rules and regulations. We wrote in that we recommend that we first consider PAC to manage this garden under city rules and regulations. They're the current manager, so it just seems logical to involve them. And again, make a timeline at which we designate how long we'll go into negotiation with them. And then if that doesn't work out, we thought we might recommend considering another nonprofit city partner. That's mostly with sensitivity to the workload that managing gardens produces for our staff. If there's no partner that's found within a certain timeline, we wouldn't recommend leaving the search for another nonprofit open to a year's time. We would recommend, giving that some finite amount of time. And again, this is all predicated on it not working with PAC, but we wanted to lay it all out. But if PAC doesn't work out nor another nonprofit, we would recommend that the city take over management of the garden. And in concert with that, we do want to be sensitive to staff demands, and so we would say we would recommend that we have some additional city resources to manage gardens. Some of them, I think, should be the introduction of new web-based technology to help streamline communication with the garden liaisons. Each of our public gardens have a liaison, and that person does pick up quite a bit of work for staff. And in return, I believe they might not be paying a garden rental plot fee. But we need them to have all the information at their fingertips in a web-based format so they don't have to keep calling city staff to get information, which I've heard sometimes is the case. And in addition, some kind of additional staff that might come in the form of hourly support. Okay, so that really relates to bringing this garden under the city's regulations. In addition to that, we recommend obviously to revise the lease so it can state that there is a Ventura Garden, and the Ventura Garden is not mentioned in this lease, even though this lease was last updated in 2013. This lease has been updated many, many times since the inception of this garden, never mentioning that this garden exists. So we would want to, have that visible in the lease. We also, two other points, we want to, as far as big picture and planning for our city resources, we would like to assess ongoing needs of expanding the community garden network. so that we do have geographical distribution of these gardens. Ventura would go a long way, but we also might certainly benefit by looking at some other gardens. We notice that people who use the gardens tend to be clustered in that neighborhood, and it's just a nice resource if we can provide that. Sort of a subtext of all this is that we don't have land to do these things, and a strong point we want to make is that here's a prime example of land. We have city-owned land with a community garden that is not on the radar of our residents. And so I just want to say that loud and clear to people who say we don't have resources, because we do. And then the last point is that we would like to have Ventura, or this exercise, this endeavor, help establish the rules for public-private partnerships for other community gardens. We see there's a deficit in institutional documentation and memory of how these gardens have grown up, which is a natural occurrence because it's a very hodgepodge system. There really is a deficit of documentation, and so we don't even know how Johnson Garden was formed for that neighborhood. And so moving forward, there's two arms of moving forward. Should the city be managing other public gardens themselves? We certainly want to know how to do that, how to move forward with it. And then when we do these proposed public-private partnerships, we also want documentation for that. So now I'd just like to open it up to questions.
Commissioner Knopper.
Thank you. So you mentioned in your, thank you, obviously you guys put a lot of thought and work into this, so thank you for that. You mentioned a wait list. Do you specifically have information how many people are on wait lists of the 4 gardens for each specific garden?
Okay, well, are you talking about our public gardens within the city? Which garden?
No,
are you talking?
Rinconada, Eleanor Party, Johnson, and Ventura.
Yes, we absolutely have data on that. So Catherine Borkin is our staff member who is a liaison with the managers of those gardens, and so she absolutely has information, and we do review. We have set rules and regulations for those gardens on our commission.
No, so I'm asking how many people are wait listed? You said that.
That does change on a fairly regular basis.
So like on an average, do you have that information, like handy, how many people currently are sitting on, because your report is predicated on that there's a lot of people that are waiting, so I'm just wondering how.
Well, there's a nuance here. So for instance, if you don't live near the north end of town, you're not necessarily going to put yourself on a wait list.
So that's my next question. Where do the residents reside who actually have plots? So for instance, I live near Eleanor Party Park, and a lot of people probably don't live in and around Party Park who have their community plot. So that it's like an A and B question.
I think that's a good question if Kat could address that. But what we have found is generally people do live in pretty close proximity for the most part. But I'd really like to turn it over to Kat just for that.
Well,
she has the address list.
Well, not with me. But we did bring it up when we were working with the consultants too on gardens.
And I was at that meeting.
Exactly. And so there were a lot of, I think it's 94306, which is on the south side. So there's quite a few, but we never.
On the wait list?
No, not on the wait list, that are actually gardening at Rinconada, for instance, who possibly, if there was one on the south side, might want to go on that side, but there never was.
Okay, so South Palo, because, okay, that's what I'm trying to clarify.
Yeah, you have to understand, a point of clarification for that zip code is it does run on a band in our city that also includes College Terrace. So 94306 is not only south.
Okay. But it was close enough to the south side compared to 94303 and 94301, which is a lot of them. But Johnson has its own waiting list, which right now, I just sent an email out to the ones that are on there asking if they still wanted to be on it, because we've never had that many vacancies at Johnson. So they've been on it for, 2 or 3 years.
So there are vacancies, there are open plots to be.
Not at Johnson. Well, Johnson right now, there is a couple right now, but there's like 8 people right now on the waiting list for Johnson.
Okay.
And you said they've been on there for some of them have been on there for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah,
So-
we're talking.
Yes.
Okay.
But only Johnson, because everybody that wants a plot there lives within walking
Right.
distance.
Okay. Thank you. Have there been complaints to you, since you're sort of the manager of the list? Do you get complaints with regard to lack of access, or specifically, I live in the south and I have to work in Rinconada, or? Yeah.
Do I get complaints that they
Yeah,
have to
like
go
people
so
that
far
are
to get to the garden?
Correct.
No.
Okay. Thank you. So, so with regard to the Ventura plot, so 29 are Palo Alto residents and 12 are of the immediate tenants, the preschool people, and then 1 is Keys School, correct?
And we don't know how big, there's a humongous plot that's about 4 or 5 times the size of all the rest. And so sometimes the absolute numbers don't make sense, because someone can have 1 plot and have 5, which is equivalent to 5 or 6 plots. And we weren't able to get that information to map who has the plot to which plot it is.
Okay. Well, and I would imagine that would be difficult. I've been in that garden quite a bit. So do you have waiting lists for that particular
Not
area?
for Ventura.
Okay.
That's
The city doesn't manage,
childcare
CAT doesn't
yeah.
manage the Ventura Garden, PAC does.
Yes.
So we have
Okay.
no
It's
information.
not managed by the city.
Okay. So can you kind of clarify, so you want the city to manage, so you want the garden, I'm just trying to sort
I
of
say
clarify.
we want it to come under the city regulations.
Right. So I guess my question is, how are they running the garden that is not to your liking versus what the city's regulations would be with regard to the management? That's question A. And B, why would you want another nonprofit to manage it potentially when the PAC people are on site and use it for their student population?
Great, thank you. Yeah, as far as how is PAC running it, it's not a question of liking versus not liking. It's just a question of transparency in the city. As a Barron Park resident, as Commissioner Cromie is a Monroe Park resident, we're in close proximity, closest to Ventura. We weren't aware that it existed. On multiple searches on the internet, you cannot find out how to rent a plot at Ventura Garden. You cannot find that it is city-owned land. Until we requested the lease and received the lease through staff, we weren't even confirmed that it was city-owned land and city-owned water. So it's a wonderful resource, and it's being used for educational purposes. But when city-owned land and city-paid water is being run by a nonprofit where the rules and regulations are not made available to the public, it's in violation with city rules and regulations.
But there are 29 Palo Alto residents that have they have the majority of plots there, so somebody,
yeah.
a Palo Alto residents.
People know about it.
I'm not trying to be argumentative, I'm just trying to clarify.
No, it's okay. And Ventura Neighborhood Association originally built that garden. So it was intended to be neighborhood, and it still mostly is neighborhood and PAC and Ventura site tenants that are using it. It's just a matter of that we have a wonderful resource that isn't available unless you know by word of mouth. And because the lease specifically says the city governs the open space, that land needs to be brought under city rules and regulations. We are in violation of the current lease because PAC is managing it. It's not a lot of money, but PAC receives the rentals for these plots. The prices aren't even consistent with our plots on the other side, and maybe they don't need to be. And I just wanted to jump quickly to your second question about why another nonprofit. absolutely the first choice. The city is very strapped for time and resources in managing the 3 gardens that they manage on the north side of Palo Alto. Absolutely, PAC would be a perfect partner to manage this as long as the city rules and regulations are being followed by the city land. So it's simply a matter of policy and what the lease says and what the lease doesn't say. The lease being updated in 2013 does not mention that PAC is renting these garden plots to anybody. There's no mention of the garden. So it's simply a matter of clarity with rules and regulations and transparency for the policy, if that makes sense.
And then I'd like to follow up and say, Commissioner Knopper, you might know about the garden because your child goes to the Keys School, so you had a connection through a school. Those of us who live in the neighborhood know nothing about this garden. And you asked what is the problem with what is happening? So there's no problem per se with PAC being the manager of this system. It's just that there's a problem with the rules that PAC is using being outside of the rules that our city has developed on this commission. And some of the rules are very unusual. Like one of their rules, which they actually don't seem to follow, is that only people in the Ventura neighborhood should have garden plots. So that would be excluding some of the people who currently have plots. So there's not a clear use of these rules, and the rules, and also there's not good institutional memory, so that within PAC, there's no documentation in oral tradition of what they've done. And so they just had a recent staff change, and they don't know what was done in the past. Within PAC themselves, it's not documented. So there's some issues there. So I'd say those are the problems. And then in answer to a question, why do another nonprofit, I'd say we don't need to. If we can work that out with PAC. PAC is an absolute ideal candidate to work this out with. We don't know that we would find another nonprofit to do this. So
our first recommendation is to come to an agreement with PAC and have that the lease updated to reflect that accurately.
Can I make a comment? Things have changed since you started doing your ad hoc committee, and Darren and I met with the new person, right? So she got copies of the rules and regulations that we follow, and she has made them theirs. So that part of it is done. Just my comment.
Well, she can't do that until all those plots have been measured, because you charge on your gardens per square foot.
The fees would be the only issue that city would have to look into at this moment. But as far as the rules and regulations, she's made it Palo Alto residents only.
Well, if that's true, you have to grapple with the private schools that are using it. So what you just said is not fully fleshed out. With the tenants that they have now at those gardens, they are not in compliance with our rules and regulations until we make accommodations.
True.
As such, so that statement is actually false.
Well, true, but I was just saying that the rules, they have worked on those and trying to follow what we have going right now.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to continue.
Commissioner Hedderly. Oh, do you?
Did you want to weigh in on something?
Well, I don't know if it'll help. Because we're going back and forth a little bit here, I want to be sure it's understood that PAC didn't start this garden. This was started by the Ventura neighborhood many years ago. I don't even know how long. So it was sort of, this garden is serving some Palo Alto residents, and it was sort of happening in the background. And I think PAC, just as good tenants, were trying to provide support, and they're willing to do whatever I think the city requires. And we haven't asked them to do anything, and so they're very willing to have the garden be consistent with the other gardens, and I think that's perfectly appropriate.
Okay.
I have several questions. One is also about the PAC management. What, if there's a short answer to this, what does their management entail? They collect the rent, they keep the forms. Are they responsible for maintenance, for waste disposal, for coordinating work days, all the other things that happen in the management of the other city parks?
The answer is no.
They do coordinate work days. The only mention of Ventura Garden on any City of Palo Alto partner website is requesting volunteers to help manage the gardens. So as far as, I don't believe the city maintains that, as the city maintains the playing fields, but I don't think the city maintains or hauls away anything from the gardens area. Is that correct?
PAC doesn't either.
No, no one does it. So when I went to visit the site, this is an illustration, there is a gardener who is digging up the dirt around one of the trees near the garden to get that dirt for her own garden. And so it's not a highly regulated space. And that's not to say that there aren't some very important uses going on in that garden, but there's not a regulation.
And my next question is the rents, PAC collects the rents, $25 a plot, it looked like. And then what do they do with that? That's supposed to cover their cost of management, which is collecting the money?
It doesn't go back to the city. So what they do with it is presumably in exchange for the management. What we've heard through word of mouth is that in exchange for managing the garden, they collect the rent for that small amount for the plots. Yeah, but it doesn't go back to the city.
Okay, so it sounds like your goal of consistency in rules and access or certainly as far as rules, is well on the way to being achievable, with the remaining question about the fees. So, yeah.
Actually, our main concern is not consistency with the rules. That is a sub-goal of updating the lease.
I'm getting to the other priorities.
Great.
Okay, so that, I think, seems like a problem that can be solved. The next question was about transparency. How do we know? How do people know about it? How can they sign up for a plot? And it seems like it does make sense for city-owned land, city-owned water, that there ought to be a city affiliation with this garden. So I think it is important to move forward in some way to make that happen. Whether or not it can have different exceptions to the standards that apply to the other gardens is yet to be seen, and I think that's very tricky because of the amount and type of users you have in that garden right now. So you're talking about, you have 12, it seems under your proposal, and maybe this is incorrect, but I gathered that you were proposing that the Country Day Little School, the Keys Middle School, and the Mountain View resident be ejected from the garden in order to free up those spots for residents?
No, not exactly. Do you want to clarify?
Rules? Yeah, first and foremost, we want the lease updated to reflect the existence and the management and the rules of the garden. After it comes in compliance, those accommodations are to be determined once we have the city, this city land under city rules and regs. Then that is a relatively easy question, since the property, the building itself is leased to PAC, and these are all tenants, the childcare are all tenants of PAC. The Sojourner Truth and Country Day, I assume, is a nonprofit, although that wasn't verifiable on the website, but they are a tenant, they are a childcare tenant on PAC. Sojourner Truth are the only two, and the majority of these are 29 are Palo Alto residents. This isn't a big issue about who's renting the plots.
My only question was whether you were interested in having plot use consistent with the rules in all of our other city community gardens.
What we put in our recommendations regarding that is that
it's under C.
On
it's
1C,
under 1C.
on our recommendations that determine whether PAC can assume management of the garden under the same rules and regs as the city's 3 existing public gardens, with an accommodation for PAC and nonprofit child care centers at Ventura to retain existing plots. We did not address keys because the fundamental issue is the lease and the ownership and the rules. We just didn't touch it. It's a private school. It's adjacent to the property. They're not renting the property. So that's not for us to decide. That is a much later down the timeline decision.
And also, I wanted to point out that another aspect of compliance that might not be obvious is that our public community gardens have what is called as a liaison, a person who is there to mentor other gardeners. And right now, we don't have that role being fulfilled at Ventura Garden. So that's another very critical aspect of the garden, especially given some of the practices that I saw going on at the garden. There's a vacuum there now, and it's not that anyone did this on purpose. It has to do with institutional transitions of staff, and that there wasn't a backup plan for transitions between staff members. Maybe some people were doing more mentoring in the past. At some point, a Ventura Neighborhood Association was involved. So,
okay, so that's a question that you want to cover in terms of consistent operations across gardens. Okay, so, and you may or may not entertain thoughts of grandfathering the current users who aren't residents. As far as the lease goes, it seems to me more important to, if you're going to make this a city-affiliated garden, to make information about it publicly available. Changing the lease, I think, is a somewhat cumbersome process that doesn't improve transparency or awareness of the garden. So I'm not sure I would put a ton of energy on that side of it. I would focus instead on community education and awareness.
And that's number 2 on our recommendations?
I'm working from my list.
Oh, yeah, okay, I just wanted to say it does tie back to, we're very interested in that.
Okay.
In what you just said, I mean, the public communication is very critical.
So I would even go so far as to say I wouldn't bother with changing the lease unless you have to, because that's not I don't think it buys you much, and it's a lot of effort. The next thing was expanded access. So it seems to me your goal in proposing, in elevating the visibility of this garden is to expand access, have better transparency and consistent rules, right? So expanding access, you already have, it's full now, and you have a wait list. We don't know how big the wait list is. Was it your sense that there's room for expansion of the site?
Absolutely. If again, that would be downstream, but there's a lot of land there. And it's been expanded one time already, we were told anecdotally.
So I think that's worth pursuing as part of the master plan process and with city staff to figure out how much room there might be to grow in that location and what the impact would be on other uses of the city-used open space. Let's see. Yeah, so I think if you're looking at grandfathering all the current users and there's not room for expansion, then we're not buying a whole lot by getting the city involved in management of this garden if we were to do that, because you've got it's a garden that's working, that people like. What you're missing
we don't know that for sure. I mean,
wait a minute. What you're missing is the ability to compete for the plot, right? So your access is limited because it's full and people don't know how to get into it. So if and when there's turnover, then you're not filling it in an open and good way. So that's something that you can focus on. I'm trying to evaluate where the return on investment is in terms of staff time in making this conversion, and I think that's something that's worth thinking about for you all. The first thing I would do is investigate capacity for expansion. And I think the next, the transparency, I'll leave it at that. I think I made all my points.
Okay, I do want to come back. We did consult with staff on this, and we do defer to staff and the city's attorney's office on whether the lease the city is out of, I don't know if compliance is the word, if the lease does need to be updated to reflect the current use of the land and the current financial arrangements.
Yes, thanks. We consulted the city attorney specifically about the question of, is it permissible or is it legally advisable to have a city garden run and managed and charged fees for a certain way, and to have on city land another community garden with different rules and different fees? And the city attorney advised us we should be making them consistent. The specifics to the lease, we should have them consistent. Regarding your lease question, it makes good sense to me to change the lease or at least bring this up at the next, at the expiration date of the current lease. And the point behind that is the ambiguity that we're suffering under right now of when did this happen. It would be formalized and captured in a legal document, which makes sense to me.
Which is when, that was one of my questions. When's the lease up?
Very soon.
Yeah, I think it's June 2016.
It's like 8 months from now.
Yeah, I think it's 2016 as well.
Am I next? Are you done?
Commissioner Lowing.
Yeah. So I don't think this is ready to take action on. I just want to add a couple of things to what Jennifer said. We now know the lease is up. I don't think we should be taking action on it until the lease is up a year from now. There's already a lot of cooperation on the site with the city, and you can get a little bit more with a little bit of discussion as opposed to legal documentation. As I read the numbers, basically 98% of the people that are using these plots are either Palo Alto residents or go to school in Palo Alto, and I certainly wouldn't want to take it away from the kids, which I know was being debated as yes or no or whatever, but, and the biggest point is that you don't get any more plots, which was Commissioner Headley's point. So I totally support that idea, is that we should be looking at expanding community gardens, generally and in the South. But this is a very, I would say, currently, this is a very small problem that we don't have to go through legal changes. We need some more research on more land, and as was stated, 30 of the 43 plots are already being used by Palo Alto folks. The transparency, I think, can be better coordinated, through CAT, and that could solve that problem right there. And also, the press is here tonight, so everybody's going to know about it by Wednesday. So, thank you.
May I chime in on that? We, during Catherine Borkwin and I met with the staff from PAC, and they did agree, and they were amenable to the concept of advertising through our website. So that's something we can move on an action item relatively quickly.
I have a question about the nonprofits. Are nonprofits eligible to get plots of land at other parks?
You wrote the rules and regulations, Commissioner Rechtel. They are not.
They're not. It has to be an individual.
We
I
wrote them on this
inherited
commission.
the program with, there's some with the gardens at Rinconada, like a housing authority, they get a plot there. But that was, I don't know if they're nonprofit or not, but they don't pay.
Who's the housing authority?
Housing authority. There's some people, they get on a list through the housing authority, and then they have a plot there. But I inherited that,
They're
so.
individuals, they don't represent the authority.
Correct.
And they're
Correct.
not using the plot for the authority.
No.
But
no.
they're not Palo Alto residents? Or they
No,
are?
they are,
Okay.
in Palo Alto.
Okay. How much maintenance do we do on the gardens? Darren or Peter, can you answer that question?
On the city-managed gardens at Rinconada, yeah. A decent amount right now. The infrastructure for the irrigation system is very old and under frequent repairs. There's a project we've got that Peter Jensen's heading up to replace that infrastructure, and I anticipate that'll be a significant drop-off in how much time our staff spends fixing mainline breaks. So a reasonable amount. It's not too disproportionate to where we do with other irrigation and spots of the city.
And when people pay garden fees, where does that money go?
To the general fund.
General fund. So it doesn't go to the Parks Department, it goes to the general fund?
Correct.
And then you get your funding through the, okay. And we talked about having the nonprofit run it. Is that just because you don't want to change horses in midstream, or is it, I mean, if you're trying to get uniformity, it would make more sense to have CAT run it?
I mean, you're absolutely right about that. It's just trying to walk a fine line between staff feeling overburdened, PAC already being there, this confusion over the schools. Right now, you can't everyone's taking all these numbers very literally beyond what they should be. So you need to do a tour of the garden. Not all these plots are being used. We were given these numbers by someone who didn't know necessarily who was assigned to what plot. There's one plot, I'm telling you, that is takes up a fourth of this garden or a fifth of this garden, and we think it's called one plot. So that in itself is very confusing. So there's a lot that is not known right now about the availability of plots in this garden. So actually, I take exception at those kinds of statements, like should we open this up to more advertising, that we wouldn't have some turnover possibilities to absorb another 12 residents into that garden. We don't really know how these numbers work. We really need our staff to figure that out, and our staff hasn't done that yet.
Okay.
This is very preliminary, so we can't really draw conclusions about capacity at this point.
Didn't we go through the gardens and shrink the plots recently?
There was some reconfiguration done at Rinconada when we did the recent project for the Library and Arts Center. So there was an annex that was changed, and so some reconfiguration did happen. Also for very large plots in the past, as those gardeners have cycled out, some of them have been split into smaller sizes.
Okay. So now path forward, is the ad hoc going to be working on this issue? Is staff going to be working? What's the next?
I think staff can take it from here. You know, this wasn't really on our radar. It is now, and so we'll work closely with PAC and the gardeners that are there, and you know, work our way to get it compliant with the rest of our gardens in the system. And happy to come back to the commission and provide updates. That's what I would suggest.
I wanted to add, this is the current version of the lease that we received from staff, and when it was most recently renewed on 2013, it was a 2-year lease which expired August 2013. The previous terms were a 5-year and a 10-year. So we don't have documentation whether this expired in another 2-year term this past August, last month, or whether it's a 3-year term. We don't have that information from staff. So it may have, if it was another 2-year term, it may have expired this past month.
Are you referring to Ventura? The light? Is that what you're referring to? The Ventura?
To the lease of the Ventura property, yeah.
Well, Donna Hartman from the real estate said it's going to be expiring in June.
June
of 16.
2016.
Yes.
So that it.
It's confirmation on that, yes.
So that, but the terms
and
aren't.
the lease is basically for the buildings.
Yeah.
The lease is for the buildings, not the open space.
Yeah, it's not for the open space.
I think we can handle
land.
this offline, though. But the end result is staff will work this, and we will get an update.
Yes, I think our commission for our ad hoc, I mean, sometimes our ad hoc committees do result in a recommendation from our commission. And so I think sometimes that's a position of strength to get to do that. So I don't know if we should just decide immediately that we're not going to, at some point, take action on this item on our commission. I mean, I just sort of wanted to open it up for some discussion.
I think my preference would be let staff work it, and let's reevaluate this further on and see if we want to act on it or whether everything's in a good situation.
Can we have a timeline for follow-up from staff?
Catherine and I are working on this one right now, so we'll continue in dialogue. I think we've got pretty clear direction of transparency, both from the commission and from our city attorney's office on where we need to be. And I think we can take steps for the transparency portion of having it posted on the website and the rules and regulations, which are already underway. I think in the next 3 months, we could have that part, I think, fairly well fleshed through. Some of the other parts, I think, will lend itself to some public outreach, some meeting with the gardeners, and that pertains to bringing in alignment with what we charge at our other gardens and how that would transition with the Ventura site, and that might take a little longer, and I probably need some time to talk to PAC about that and those gardeners before I committed to any time frame for that portion.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. We are behind time, so let's move on. The next is the update on the Parks, Trails, Open Space, and Recreation Facilities Master Plan. Isn't natural spaces in there too? Any case, Peter Jensen will be talking about the master plan.
I'll just kick it off. There isn't a whole lot to go over this evening. Just wanted to give the commission an update. We did have a study session with the City Council on August 27th. Is that right? August 27th?
31st.
Okay. End of August, and we got some feedback from the council. Maybe some of you saw it. Keith, Chair Reckbell was there, and thank you for speaking. So I think that we learned that we did not have enough information to share with council. It didn't give them the full story of the path that we've been on as a commission, which has been pretty extensive and and pretty deeply involved in this process. And so what we shared with council was sort of too narrow of a perspective of where we've been and where we are. And so they shared that feedback, and I thought it was very fair, actually. So we're taking some time to do a redo with the council and another study session, which is planned for November 2nd, and a much more comprehensive report from MIG and a staff report as well. And I think we're excited about that. In fact, the report that MIG prepared for the study session that we had has already been reworked considerably, and we had a draft. Latest draft was yesterday, I believe, and it's I think nicely written and much better and closer to what we need, what I think the commission is looking for and the council is looking for. So Peter's going to, I think, talk a little bit about that. I would like to suggest that between now and that study session, that either the ad hoc committee continue to meet to refine the presentation to the council, because you've been so close to this. I think it's helpful to have us aligned with that presentation. I think I felt this time it was a little bit staff sort of a little bit on our own there, and the commission wasn't quite there with us. That's on us. So we could do that with the ad hoc that's been meeting. By the way, thank you for doing that. That's Chair Reckdahl, Commissioner Lowing, and Commissioner Headley have been meeting with us these last couple of months on this. So we could do that, or we could have a special meeting with the full commission between now and the study session. And I mention that because the next regular meeting is October 27th, I think, and that's like a week before the study session with council. And I'm eager to have a sort of some more time with the commission on the Parks Master Plan, particularly before the next study session. So we can talk more about that after Peter shares just a little bit about the latest report we've got from MIG.
So yes, as Rob was alluding to, the council wanted to see a lot more information on kind of the process that we've been going through, as well as a detailed breakdown of where we're actually going and how the master plan will be put together and the recommendations will be made. So we actually, the newest draft of that report is much more detailed. It has a lot of information on how we actually get to that final destination, which I know that some of the members of the commission here have definitely had questions about. So just in general, I feel very positive about what is now we are producing basically for the council report, but I think it also will help solidify the direction that we're going and tells the story of all the way basically to the end, which we've been, I think, getting to that process, but I think we want to see it now, and that's kind of what this does. So I am excited to see that is going along, and I'm looking forward to working with the ad hoc and then also coming back to the commission at the end of next month before we do our study session with the council again to discuss those more and to basically lay out that whole thing so everyone can see it. So.
I just have a quick question about the survey. How are you feeling about survey responses?
Survey responses, I haven't received an update from MIG in about a week, but we are up past 200 responses already. And there is further outreach that city staff can do to bolster those numbers. So we're feeling pretty good about the responses that we're getting so far from that.
When does it close?
Well, we were looking at doing it at the end of this week, but because of our response to the council, we're going to keep it open for another 2 or 3 more weeks.
Okay.
So
I would just add that I've heard just anecdotal feedback of people that have participated. They really like the money piece and having to make choices about where to invest, and so that seems to be somewhat effective. So look forward to seeing the summary responses. I do hope we get quite a few more than 200. The other thing that is important to mention is we do have a stakeholders meeting this week on Thursday evening. the first. The meeting is not going to be so much about working the priorities or getting into recommendations. The stakeholders group hasn't come together as a group for some time, and largely because we took a couple of steps back and did more data and outreach. They've been engaged, they've come to different meetings, community meetings, and some of the specific focus group meetings we've had during that process. But we really think it's important to give them a sort of an orientation as well as where we are at and what we've discovered through the process and the building of the matrix and the areas of focus, and sort of talk through those things and allow them to ask questions, share with them the variety of reports that are on the website so that they can really do some homework and some harder thinking before a workshop, so they come really ready to help us out with the prioritization and recommendation exercise. So that's the focus for the stakeholder group meeting this Thursday, and hopefully some commissioners can be there. I think we decided on a couple of commissioners to be ad hoc to the stakeholders committee, but I can't remember who that is right off the bat.
We did. I think it was Commissioner Cromie.
I went to the original meeting. I know I'm on that ad hoc.
It might have been Pat.
I forget who the second person was.
I think we have the documentation of that. I'm sure we can find.
For the stakeholders meetings was it Keith? Okay, we could always have 3 too.
I was at the first one, but I'm out of town this Thursday night. I can't attend.
Okay.
The meeting is at 6:30 at the Embarcadero room at the Rinconada Library. If you haven't been in that room yet, it's one of our beautiful new public spaces. So it's always good to have more meeting spaces and use that room. So.
I have a question. Are you opening it up at some point, or is this time for questions? Or are you?
Are you done? Yeah, go ahead. About the.
We didn't. Can you review with me what the ad hoc committee on the master plan's goals are that you mentioned is comprised by Commissioners Hetterly, Rechtel, and Lowing? I'm a little bit confused on, I know they were formed when we were looking over some of the document, but I just need clarity because I want to make sure that a lot of these issues are still coming to the full commission, which is what we decided as a commission. So sometimes when this work gets taken offline, we lose the transparency on the whole commission, and this is a really important topic, and I don't quite get what the ad hoc is doing. So can you review what those goals are of that ad hoc, whoever's in charge, whoever is a staff liaison to that ad hoc?
I don't think we established specific goals. I don't think we've done that for any ad hoc committee specific, other than, sort of you're going to be involved with the stakeholder committee and follow that process along. With this particular one, it was more recent, and it was focused, I think, primarily on the criteria and helping. We did the principles, and then there was sort of the next filter, which is the criteria, and the commission was. And staff, I would say, was not satisfied with the initial first sort of draft and even second draft of that, and we said we could use some help working with a few commissioners on redefining those, and that was very helpful. Actually, I think we're in a much better place with the criteria. But that's how it was formed, and I think it was sort of pretty much limited to that. So this does expand the. A little more if we.
So I guess that's what I want to know is I kind of understood why we formed them, and they reported back to us with a report, but now tonight we didn't even get a report on anything for this agenda item. So I feel a little bit in the dark, and so I just want to make sure that something hasn't just been taken offline with that ad hoc that's not transparent to the rest of the commission, because I don't think it's a good thing to have a 30-minute agenda item on something this important with no report. There is nothing, unless I missed it in my packet.
No, and maybe it's not clear, but there isn't a whole lot to report, I guess is what we're saying. We had the study session, with council, and we're taking a step back and going to redo it. And
But like, I don't know, I wasn't at that study session with council, so it would have been really nice to document what came from that to our commission. So, because I mean, I can go back and watch the tape, but usually we get some kind of information exchange when things like that happen.
I think every other meeting we've had a report, an update report. We didn't have one today. We're just giving you the verbal report of what occurred. And I didn't think that it was especially good use of our time to write that all up, but rather focus on the return to council and rewriting the report so that it's more closely fitting to what the council needs. And the commission's going to see that report as well, and we'll share that report with you at the next meeting. My hope would be that the commission, and I would recommend that the ad hoc committee, and maybe that's a redefining of what the ad hoc committee is doing.
Yeah, that's what I want definition on.
If we do that, is to work with staff in our preparation for going back to council on November 2nd. It would be very helpful for staff if the ad hoc committee would be willing to do that. We could then meet over the next few weeks, and then on the 27th, even sort of dry run, the study session with council the week before we go to council for feedback from the full commission, and you'd have the report, of course.
Well, I think that ad hoc, what is the name of that ad hoc committee?
I don't know that we have names for our ad hoc committees.
We do. We have a name for every ad hoc committee on the master plan.
We have a
Master
topic.
plan stakeholders
We have a
group.
topical
Right,
name.
so we had master plan survey ad hoc, we had master plan stakeholders ad hoc, we had a third, we were very careful in how we divvied this up. And I can't remember the name of the third ad hoc, someone here probably who's on it. I was on the master plan survey ad hoc with Stacy Ashland.
Let's call it the master plan council study session ad hoc.
Okay, so then I think we should open it up and make sure, I mean, I don't think it's a good policy to form an ad hoc for a certain purpose, which was served. And again, I'm not asking for a space on this myself, I'm not doing that. But I think that if it's a new ad hoc for a new purpose, we should at least go through the exercise of opening it up and make sure that everyone who wants to be on that has a chance. I guess I defer to our chair of our commission on that.
So right now we have three of us. You have no interest in being on the ad hoc.
Well, at least I now know what this ad hoc is. I really have been confused about what the new role of this ad hoc is and what the name of it is. So can you just summarize that and then we can open it up?
Yeah. I mean, we don't have a name. The name is that we are helping the staff work on the master plan for the council, the presentation for the council and the final report.
I did name it. Right, and up until now, we've been talking about the criteria with the ad hoc, which is what it was formed for. So, and I think I brought it up for this very reason, that it would be helpful to have the ad hoc continue with a little bit of a different focus to help us get ready for the study session. So, it's been completely transparent in my view.
So it's called the Master Plans Council Presentation Ad Hoc?
Sure, that's fine.
And we really do always name our ad hocs. I'm not just, we really do.
They have a topic that they focus on, right?
Is there anyone else who wants to be on this? It just seems like we should form it tonight.
Okay, Stacy, are you interested?
No.
Okay. Then we have three interested and three on it, so we'll keep the status quo then. Okay. Do you guys have anything else to add for the master plan? Okay.
No, I have nothing more to add.
Okay, then we will move on to liaison updates. Do we have any ad hoc updates.
Darren is going to do an update on the dog park
Okay.
situation.
Thank you so much. I'll give you a real quick update on where the ad hoc committee is at, working on the shared use dog park concept. I'll be bringing, this will be a brief update, but in October, I'll bring a staff report. We'll discuss this more fully and help get the commission's feedback on how we best meet the city's dog park needs. A quick recap on what the commission's done on dog parks. In 2010, the commission had a policy that said we should be looking for dog recreation areas every time we do a park renovation, and that has not resulted, as we all know, in any new dog parks. And so we said, well, we should take in a holistic look rather than a piecemeal approach. As every renovation arrives, let's look holistically. Along came the Parks Master Plan, which does exactly that, and it will do that. It's looking at our entire park system and giving advice on where we best should locate these dog parks. However, the ad hoc committee said in the interim, would it make sense to do a 6-month pilot study to look at a shared use concept, and shared use being someplace where we've got partially fenced off or a fenced off area. Typically that ends up being athletic fields where it's already partially fenced and large where dogs can exercise. This issue was discussed with the commission on September 23rd, 2014. The commission advised the ad hoc should move forward looking at a proposal, including outreach to neighbors, user groups, and the strategy for evaluating how this criteria might work and metrics of success. The ad hoc committee met with a small group of stakeholders from the newly organized Palo Alto Dog Owners Group, representing 300 dog owners in Palo Alto, and met separately with the athletic field users or some stakeholders from them to figure out their interests and concerns. The athletic user group explained that they're concerned that the off-leash activity, should it take place in an area where teams are practicing and competing, would pose a threat to the safety of kids playing soccer and baseball, primarily dogs digging holes, kids turning ankles, or balls taking bad hops out of those holes and injuring players. They were also slightly concerned about gradual deterioration of playing conditions should there be dogs exercising and playing on soccer fields or baseball fields. And perhaps there being dog feces that might not be picked up. The representatives from the dog owners group explained, not surprisingly, that there's a shortage of dog parks in Palo Alto and that we need more desperately, and that ideally they would have spaces for small dogs as well as large areas where big dogs could really open up and run. Staff hosted a community meeting on July 30th, 2015 to collect feedback on this concept of shared dog parks. We brought locations after the committee, the ad hoc committee and staff had analyzed what places would lend themselves to having sensible shared use facilities. And there were really 3 that jumped out. It's Greer, Hoover, and Baylands Athletic Center. And then there were hours that also we proposed. That is Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. It was a well-attended public meeting. Approximately 75 people attended. The vast majority of participants were dog owners advocating for additional parks. A small number of the participants were neighbors to one of the 3 parks, saying that they were very concerned that we would have more off-leash activity. The primary concern is confrontations between their children and off-leash dogs, and an increase of unpicked up dog feces. There were also a small group of people mentioning their concerns that the off-leash activity would have a negative impact where the sports teams practice and compete. In general, the dog owners were not satisfied with the proposed hours and locations. Several people had pointed out that if we went with what we were proposing, that would be at 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., we'd be excluding a large majority of park users or dog walkers that aren't available at that time. They're either working or busy. And to be fair, it really had to have AM and PM hours. We also heard that you really need dog parks all over. The idea that we'd have one pilot really seemed to draw a lot of frustration from folks because the deed is so great, one little spot is just insufficient, and we needed to find spaces in a number of areas to make it successful. One participant also pointed out the city of Mountain View had recently added several dog off-leash areas and suggested we look into that. After the community meeting, the ad hoc committee and staff did some additional research. We started by verifying the amount of use we have at those 3 sites we talked about, Greer, Hoover, and Baylands Athletic Center. And by use, I mean scheduled recreation activities, soccer, baseball, et cetera. We met with our recreation staff and found out where the conflicts would be, specifically looking at the AM/PM thing. It would be a conflict at Greer and Baylands Athletic Center where we have evening athletics taking place, and that would be a challenge. Hoover would also be if it was inside the baseball field, but there's also turf at Hoover outside that baseball field. That seemed to be the area where we'd have the least conflicts with the user groups. We researched how the city of Mountain View has experimented with their shared use dog parks. City of Mountain View started the pilot program in June 2014 and made it permanent in May 2015. I spoke with one of the staff that managed that, got it off the ground, that did some of the public outreach. And he explained that the success of the program really depends on who you're talking to. His experience was that if you ask the dog owners, they're loving it. It's going extremely well. And many other residents aren't so happy with the program. Only one of their 9 sites is on an athletic field. That is the shared use with an athletic field. The other 8 are unfenced, passive recreation areas, passive turf. One of the sites is fenced off. That's the Shoreline Park dog park, but the other ones that they added in 2014 are all unfenced, so dogs could meander in and out of the area without any fence to contain them. Lack of fencing has caused some issues for them. They said that the dog owners frequently stray outside the confines of the off-leash area or end up treating the entire park as an off-leash site. There were a number of complaints during the pilot program, and the major ones focused around the people not observing the hours or days, dog owners coming on days where they weren't supposed to be there off-leash. And the other concerns were from parents whose dogs had approached their children. Mountain View hired a security firm, CLM, to do security at 2 of the parks. And they also have a partnership with Silicon Valley Animal Control Authority to help with the enforcement of these rules. The staff also pointed out that their Park and Recreation Commission did not recommend doing any pilot off-leash shared use sites. Instead, they had recommended a permanent dog park. But their city council had said that they would like to go ahead and proceed with a pilot for 1 year, and they did so. When they came back and had done analysis on their 1-year pilot, shared it with their Park and Recreation Commission, Commission said we need to do more, we need more enforcement, and we need to analyze this for an additional year. And the council, their city council did not agree and said we're going to go ahead and make it permanent right now. And so they did so in May of 2015. So that's the initial outreach we've got from, or learning lessons from City of Mountain View. The ad hoc committee, our ad hoc committee working on this, because of some of the challenges we learned from that public outreach, the desire to say, well, AM's not going to be enough. You really have to have more. And one site's not enough. You need to have more than that. The ad hoc committee and staff started to investigate opportunities for permanent dog parks that could be implemented soon without necessarily spending too much money and not having to wait for the park's master plan to be completed. So we sat together, talked through some different options that staff had been thinking about, as had our commissioners on the ad hoc. We came up with 3 sites that we think are going to be viable options. That is, they'll be fairly low cost to put up the necessary fencing to secure it. We can't think of too many obstacles in them, and it would not have to necessarily wait for the park's master plan to be completed. So these are still preliminary. There still has to be some additional ideas flushed out. I'll give you just an example. One of them is Mitchell Park Dog Run. It's about 0.5 acres, but there's a significant amount of passive turf adjacent to that area that with minimal amount of fencing could almost double the size of that dog run. And we could have a fairly large dog run and where large dogs could kind of open up and get a real run in. Another idea was at El Camino Park. Now, we'd originally looked at a dog park being on the north side of El Camino. That was closest to San Francisco Creek, and we found out that because of creek setbacks, that was not a viable option. However, there's undeveloped portions of El Camino Park on the south side. This is closest to Red Cross, and it's undeveloped. There's nothing on it except for some underground utilities that pertain to our utilities department. And we thought that might be a viable option. We looked into what kind of size approximately we get if we had fenced off this. It's about 0.77 acres, which would be bigger than our biggest existing dog park. So you get a fairly sizable dog park out of that. There are a couple nuances that we still need to flush through. That is, Stanford may have an issue with this. There's some conversation about perhaps a pathway going through there. Right now, I'm working with planning department to look into that and see if this is a viable option. And one last site, similar to this one in that we've got a few hoops we need to go through, but the Colorado substation, this is adjacent to Greer Park on the Colorado side. It's a utility site, and there's a large landscaped area. It's just under an acre in size, actually. Passive turf, not used for anything but aesthetics. And we had thought at one point, could we fence that off, and could it be a dog park? We're having preliminary discussions with utilities right now to see if they'd be amenable to that. And it could be another viable option for something we could implement sooner rather than later. There's no other uses for that site identified or planned right now. So that's where we're at right now with the ad hoc, and I'll defer to Commissioner Headley and Knopper if they have anything else to add to that. And then again, we look to come back next month with a staff report with some of this more fleshed out. Thank you.
I don't have anything to add. That was a very detailed report. I just reiterate, it's not a discussion item tonight, it's just an update. So it's this, you got a detailed preview of what'll be in the staff report for full discussion next month.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I have a comment on some of the material you said, but because it is not on the agenda, I guess I have to withhold it, which sort of begs a question of why we got that beautiful report when we can't respond to it. So I think we do have to, you know, keep with our goal of noticing ad hoc presentations on our agenda, because it would be lovely to get to respond to that presentation.
Okay. Comments and announcements.
We wanted to find, before we left ad hocs, I didn't get to say, we do have a Lucy B. Evans ad hoc committee, and we have not really been able to do anything on it because we've been waiting for a presentation from Mr. Aiken. We our last meeting was with him, and then the next step was for him to come and do a presentation, which we haven't had yet. But I do want to point out there's a very important community outreach meeting taking place on the Lucy B. Evans Interpretive Center. And can staff remind us, Commissioner Ashland and I think it's probably, it might conflict.
We think it's this Thursday,
yeah,
October 1st.
It might conflict with the
Tomorrow
stakeholders meeting.
It's tomorrow, the 30th, 6 o'clock.
Oh, it is
Lucy
tomorrow.
Evans Center.
So I just want to make sure I get that in my notes. So it's Wednesday, the 30th at 6 p.m. And I would.
It's at the Interpretive Center.
Yes.
And I will get a go if Commissioner Ashland won't be in town, but if anyone else from the commission wants to go, I think that would be really great to have someone else there.
I only had two other, I had two announcements. I was going to mention that one that Commissioner Cromie just mentioned. We did have a commission and boards recognition event on September 12th, and those that couldn't attend got a little gift, and it's in the box right here. So you can pick that up when you, as you leave, but it was a nice event at Mitchell Park. And there's also an interesting event happening out of our Office of Human Services. I'll be doing a little more work across the department, and their commission is doing a variety of things, but doing a Veterans Summit this Friday that you may have seen or heard about, and it's Friday afternoon. And I think there still may be some seats available if you're interested in doing that, but the commission's focusing on a couple of things, but one of the things is ending veteran homelessness. It's a big issue around the country, and it's an issue here in Palo Alto too. That it's estimated that there are 40 homeless veterans in Palo Alto, actually, and proportionately, our county has more veteran homeless folks than around the country. And so there's some people coming from the White House, actually, that work on this topic. They're going to be speaking on Friday afternoon. It starts at 1 o'clock, and just you should be aware of that, and I can send you a link so you can get a little more information, and if you are interested, I can make sure you can get in to that event. Peter?
Aurora, the sculpture in front of City Hall, is being replaced with a new sculpture. If you didn't notice on the way in, we're dismantling it. The new sculpture will be installed October 8th. It's called Rondo. Right now it's on display at Berkeley, Cal Berkeley. Associated with that, the planting that's going to go back into the circular planter out there on October 17th, which is a Saturday, there will be a volunteer planting day. I will be leading that. I will also be discussing some of the things you heard about trees today, trees and water, plants that are adequate with those trees, and we'll be doing planting, and I'll be doing a demonstration of installing a drip irrigation system. So that's happening on October 17th. October 24th, there's a volunteer tree planting day that I'm working on with Canopy and the Barron Park Homeowners Association along the Bull Park pathway next to the Veterans construction site there. That will be on October 24th. That's a Saturday as well, from 8 till noon. We'll be planting 60 trees on that day. So if you'd like to attend either one of those, please feel free.
Okay. I had a question about El Camino Park. When is it scheduled to open?
We're scheduled for November. It's looking like mid-November. As soon as we just got the sod in today, so it's going to be establishing. Got a few last amenities like trash cans and recycling totes coming in. So I should have a firmed up date coming soon. We'll probably do a grand opening, and I'll be sure to send it to you guys right away.
Okay. And Bowdoin Park, what's the status on that?
I have to get back to you on that. I don't have a date for that.
And Monroe Park, is that?
Monroe Park, we're going out to bid right now.
What?
We are going out to bid.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, the contract has gone to council, so we're waiting for approval.
Okay. And Magical Bridge, how's the durability? Has there been any problems with the new?
That's been a big challenge for us. A good challenge in some ways because it's such a successful playground and it's very, very popular. But with popularity comes additional challenges of trash, of bathroom maintenance, and equipment, just wear and tear. And so the need to invest more time and resources to support that new asset we're discovering is very much needed, and we don't have all of those resources. So we're working hard on that, Darren and his staff in particular. I'm working with the Friends group, who still are contributing a lot too, and they're there and helping. So it's something that we're going to be asking for in the budget probably to support some additional maintenance costs for that new playground.
Okay. And last thing, I went out to Bixby. I hadn't been out there for a month or so. A lot of stuff going on. They've gone through, and almost the whole thing now is being redone, including the part over by the poles. That whole park that has been open for years, now they're putting new soil on it, and it's, was it early 2016 we're going to open the whole thing, is it? Or is it mid 2016?
I believe they're wrapping up the prep right now. So they're going to, what they did was bring it back into compliance. It had settled near the pole field, so it was significantly almost 5 feet depressed from where it needs to be per the regulations to manage the landfill. So they brought that back up, and they've hydroseeded and put down straw wattles to prep it for the storm. That will be come hopefully November, December.
Oh, they've hydroseeded?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Significant portions. So it's coming along very nicely.
I noticed they put like burlap on that slope right by the parking lot.
Yeah, that'll help a lot with that erosion. Brand new soil brought in like that will not hold well when the storms hit. And so those are the measures, hydroseeding and put down
Let me piggyback on that. It was just in time for the eclipse. Yeah. I went up there for the eclipse. There were hundreds of citizens in the dark by the poles.
Oh, wow.
It was awesome. You couldn't get a parking spot in the no parking areas.
Wow. That's cool.
It was just absolutely terrific to see, at nighttime, all these people using our parks. Yeah. Good job. There was no moon, but everybody had fun in the parks.
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
I just had one more. I wanted to do a shout out to Commissioner Lowing for his support of our interview process for a new assistant director. We're down that very important key position in the department, plus 2 superintendents, which has been challenging with all the stuff going on. But Commissioner Lowing made himself available for 2 days, 2 afternoons, 1 full day and then an afternoon, which was today, to interview 7 or 8 candidates. And so appreciate that very much. And we have a couple of good candidates that we're looking at and hope to make a decision soon.
Okay, let's move on to tentative agenda for October. Did we want to consider moving it up a week to give us an extra week between the meeting and the council meeting?
We could do that.
What do people think
That might
about
be helpful. I don't know how.
October 20th versus October 27th?
Actually,
What?
yeah, I have to be at another committee meeting on the 20th.
Okay, so
The finance committee meeting.
Okay.
I'm out of town on the 20th as well.
Okay, well, let's keep it the 27th then. Okay, so what's on the list?
I think we have a dog park report.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd vote for dog park to come back.
Yeah.
The
staff report.
agendized staff report.
And obviously the Parks Master Plan will be on there.
Probably have a website.
A website update.
We had mentioned last month about possibly having junior museum. Is that in the cards, or do you think that's going to be slower?
I have to
rolling?
check with the team on that to see if they're ready to come back.
It might not hurt to come back to Bixby Park since so much is going on. It'd be nice to just get a report periodically
Bixby Park? Okay.
if we don't have other, more pressing matters.
The bulk of that agenda is going to be on the master planning for the meeting with council. Is that correct?
Well, the meeting on council is going to be just a few days later, so we'll basically say what we think will be on it, but we won't be able to do major changes. We may be able to polish it up here and there. We have to submit ahead of time, 10 days ahead,
Yeah,
don't
so
we?
the packet for the council for the 2nd will already have gone out, and it'll be public, so you'll all see that.
Okay,
Of course,
so
the
we won't be able
before.
to change it, but we,
So how early would we have to meet if we were to have a special meeting to discuss that and still get it through the?
wait 2 weeks.
And then within the next couple of weeks. Yeah. We'll get something on the calendar right away.
Okay. Last time we mentioned something about an auditor fee study.
Yeah, I don't have anything to report on that just yet. The auditor is doing a fee study on.
When is that going to be done?
They usually take about 3 months to do their audit. They're maybe 6 weeks in. I can check to see if there's anything to report.
Okay. Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, do you have?
November, we might want to talk about the November meeting because I think it lands the week of Thanksgiving. And so if we want to move it out or up.
Yeah, we should not have it Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and just if everybody's calendars gets filled up so quickly, it might be good to make a decision this evening. If you
Do we want to pencil it in a week early, or do you?
Why don't I just send an email out with some dates, just so I can check and see if a room's available?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that works.
Yeah, the other option is to leapfrog the other way and just have an early December meeting and not have anything late December. We split the difference. Master plan may be driving us if the council wants certain stuff done, maybe. But, okay. Do we have a motion?
I move we adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, adjourned. Thank you.